do you have a good, do we need to move closer?
We're good.
We're good? Okay. So,
Great, yeah.
in my conversation with the candidate, that I spoke with Melissa Romano earlier today, and I really appreciate your giving me some time again, Mike.
Absolutely.
Lieutenant Governor Mike Cooney running for Congress, running for governor.
I would not run for Congress.
But the last time we spoke was in February, pre-COVID. And my health things have changed. And what a different world we're living in. I came in with your mask on, and I have my mask with me, and of course Missoula, we're masked up. And it's a different world. But we had a great conversation at the Great Northern Hotel. And happy that you could take the time to talk with me today.
Thank you.
And the biggest issue, I guess, that is on my mind is should you be, when you are elected our next governor, your budget priorities, because there's a lot of talk on the other side of the aisle that current administration should be making cuts, and they should be cutting jobs, and they should be doing all this stuff. But from what I've read, your administration has done a really good job of having a rainy day fund, and we won't need to do those kinds of things. So, what would your priorities be in the next legislative session?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for sitting down with me. Appreciate it. It's always fun. That's a great question. Now, your introduction, I think, is pretty much spot on. But I will say that as strong as of a position as we're currently in, we still need to really keep our eye on the ball. I mean, this is a very interesting time. We've never gone through a pandemic like this in our lifetime, and we've never seen actions needing to be taken as we've recently seen, and we are not sure what's going to happen in the future. So we do need to be, I think, very mindful of that. We are in a much better position than many other states. All our reserves are at full capacity. We do have a rainy day fund that's sitting right out there, and it's looking really good. We have asked agencies to watch themselves very carefully. If they absolutely positively need to fill a position, we're saying go right now, we're saying fill that position. But if it's just kind of, boy, we wish we had this, but we could live without it, hey, well, let's live without it for a little bit more. So, I mean, I think we're taking a very cautious, a very surgical approach to this whole budget situation. Some on the other side just immediately want to come in and start cutting. They want to cut the positions, they want to cut the budget. I mean, even in a pandemic, we still have services to provide. Why on earth would we want to start cutting where we would make it even harder to get unemployment benefits out to people right now? And we're paying unemployment benefits to people who have never really been eligible for unemployment benefits because the federal government has changed their program. We had to shift and be able to start providing benefits for people who are self-employed and so forth. That's new. We had to shift very quickly to do that. I think that is just the wrong-headed approach at this point. That's the last thing we need in our state right now. But as we get moving forward, we need to be cautious. We need to be mindful of what we're doing. But you ask, I guess the initial question is, what are my priorities? My priorities are going to continue to be the same priorities I've had since I started running for governor. I mean, we talked about important programs that we think are going to be very useful for the people of Montana. Even in this time of a pandemic, I would love to see Montana get a pre-K, a public education pre-K program, as most of the states have in our country. Is that going to cost some money? Yes, it is. Will we be able to do it 100% in the next session? I don't know. I'm not willing to throw in the towel and say we're going to throw that out the window right now, because who knows? We may not be able to afford it. I'm saying This is a priority, and if we're in a position to fully fund the program like that, that is a great thing for the people of Montana. It's a great thing for our economy. It's a great thing for the working women and men of this state, and it's a great thing for the children of this of our state. So I said, so there is one. Healthcare, it has to remain a big priority, and part of that is making sure that we continue Medicaid expansion and that we keep running that program as well as it's running. I mean, over 90,000 people in Montana are really using that program in the middle of a pandemic. What would they be doing if that program wasn't there? So it's good for our people in Montana. It's good for our rural community health services throughout the state of Montana. We need to do everything we can to shore up and bolster that, so that in 2025, when it comes up for reauthorization, hopefully it's not gonna be a political football anymore.
Right.
It's gonna be something that this just makes common sense. We need to continue it, and it'll be a bipartisan support. And so we need to make sure that we're dealing with that. Well, we've talked a lot about making sure that pharmaceutical items, prescription drugs become more affordable in Montana. I don't know that that's going to end up costing us a lot of money, at least initially, is in the proposal that I think we can pass almost immediately when we get into the next session, because what it would set up a program to allow Montanans to legally and safely import some of their drugs from Canada. And we know
Pfizer was trying to do 20%.
Exactly. And what's the biggest difference between then and now is the federal government under Donald Trump has said they support states' efforts to do this. And so we just need to come up with a plan, submit it to the federal government, get approval, and that should allow people in Montana to start purchasing some of their drugs from Canada, which we know costs so much less. A bottle of insulin costs almost $290 in the United States. In Montana, the folks I know who need it, that's exactly what they told me. In Canada, it's $29. So I mean, that would bring some relief. But again, I don't see that as being a big budget buster. But as we talk healthcare, there are other things. We need to look at ways of driving more resources into mental health care throughout the state. We know that's a real need. There are a number of other programs in DPHHS that that really affect Montanans and their families. So we need to be looking very seriously at all of those. So I think there are a number of things out there that I think will demand our attention. We will, obviously the governor has to make sure that we pass a balanced budget, and we will do that. I hopefully will have a legislature willing to work with our administration to that end. I just because we're uncertain as to where we'll exactly be on the budget, even though I think we're going to be in very strong position. I think we move forward with our goals and our priorities, and then once we get there, then we'll have a much better idea of what we'll be able to afford and what we'll be able to do. But I'm more for, let's look positively going forward. Let's have the plan ready to go, and then we'll adjust as need be, just as we have to with this pandemic right now. It changes everything from day to day.
Well, and your opponent seems to be saying some things about your history that I'd like to give you an opportunity to correct. And one of those is that you've added millions. At first he framed it as you were a millionaire, and now he's changed the framing to you have cost millions in different kinds of fees, and I just would like you to speak to those fees and perhaps why you voted in favor, or you were for those fees, because I think that those fees are probably pretty important.
Yeah. Well, I've heard a couple. I've heard a couple of the charges, and one is that I supported a gas tax, an increase in the gas tax. as did a number of Republicans. That passed by a bipartisan vote. I was lieutenant governor, so I didn't have a chance to vote on it. Maybe I'd voted on increasing the gas tax in the past when I was in the legislature, but I'm assuming that's probably what they're talking about. And of course, that was the time when we saw our highway fund start to deplete, and we needed to pass an addition to the gas tax in order to keep drawing down the amount of money we got from the federal government, so we could continue to maintain the infrastructure in the state of Montana, building new roads, repairing our bridges, making sure that they were being maintained. Those are the dollars that we use to draw down those federal highway dollars.
Is that socialism?
Some people might think that. Some people might think that. But so, I mean, again, if you don't care about infrastructure, if you want to put, if you want to put our economy at risk very quickly, you let our infrastructure start to crumble worse than it is, and you don't keep up with it, that will have a huge effect on our economy. That will have a huge effect on our rural communities that are dependent on our roads in order to get people in and out and goods in and out, and tourists in and out. And so I'm still absolutely convinced that my support of an additional gas tax, which brought down additional federal dollars and allowed us to continue to repair our infrastructure, was the right decision. I'm trying to think what the other. I think.
Well, hunting and fishing licenses.
Well, I think it was an increase in the fees on on automobile licenses, and I'm assuming that perhaps was when I was in the Senate, and we allowed people to opt in and put additional fees on their car license plates to help support our state parks in the state. But you had the option to opt out. So when I go to renew my license plates, I have the option of saying, I want to give you an additional $6 or whatever it is, or I'm not going to be driving that car to a state park, so I don't want to pay it. You have that choice. But those dollars went to helping maintain and to improve the infrastructure in our state parks, which, again, if I remember, that was when I was in the Senate, I believe that was carried by a Republican senator. So it's easy to say I'm a big taxer and I'm a big spender, but typically I will tell you, I think government is there to provide services to the people. Services cost money. I think people expect government to do certain things. And so I think you have to be honest about it. And if what my opponent is saying is that he would be against all of these things, and I've also heard him say that he's for an immediate tax break in the state. He's also for cutting the state workforce, which I would love to just tell him that the workforce in the state of Montana is smaller than it was when Steve Bullock took office. So, it's not as if we have built this bloated state bureaucracy. I think we've been very, very smart in our approach. But again, Montanans pay for government. They want services, and they should get good services. And I think we've been pretty good about delivering services. Although I'm sure there are people who feel that we could have done things better in many different ways. But it's not for lack of trying, and it's not for us, being spendthrifts when it comes to making sure we're trying to get these services out the door.
Well, and I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you did when you were in the Secretary of State's office, the business enterprise.
When I was secretary, when we do so when I first became Secretary of State, that office was funded just as any general fund agency was funded. Every year we got a chunk of money from the general fund. Right. I can't remember what it was, $3 million or whatever, but it was a chunk of change. But for the services that the Secretary of State provides to the public, we charge fees. So if you want to file your articles of incorporation, which you're expected to do when you're doing business in Montana, you're going to pay X number of dollars to do that. Or if you're going to file a uniform commercial code lien, I think at that time it was $7 to file one of those. So we collected that $7. Well, all of those fees that we collected added up to quite a bit of money over the course of the year. And I sat there and I looked and I thought, why are we drawing down $3 million or whatever the amount was and putting it and operating on that, and then we're collecting these fees, and then those fees just went into the treasury? Well, it made sense. I had no problem with that. But why not let us operate on those fees and let the state keep the $3 million? And
that's a pretty good business decision.
It was a business decision. It's absolutely a business decision. So we went to the legislature, and over the course of a handful of legislative years, because they give us a little bit of leeway to try this, and then the next session they expanded it, and I think it took like 3 sessions to finally get us where we weren't getting any general fund money, and we were literally operating as a business. And we didn't have to increase the fees. And we were still, at the end of the fiscal year, returning money to the treasury. And I remember one of the funniest questions I was asked in the legislative process is one legislator looked at me and they said, "Are you saying you want to operate your office like a business?" And I said, "That's exactly what we're trying to say." He said, "Well, what if you don't bring in enough fees?" And I said, "Well, then, just like any business, you have to adjust what you're doing, because obviously you don't need to be spending as much as you're spending if you're not bringing in that amount of money to cover it." And he said, "You operate like a business." And I said, "That's exactly right." So we were able to get the office, basically to take that initial $3 million or whatever it was, and let that go to other things, whether it was health and human services or, whatever, education or corrections or wherever, where they always are looking for money. And we were able then to just start operating on our fees, and it was a model that worked out very well. And I think it's a model that's still being used today in the Secretary of State's office. But it was, again, it was just a no-brainer. It made good sense. And it's just, a government always needs to be looking for those creative ways of operating and, using your smarts and figuring out things. And so, I think it was a good business decision.
So, there's been some other ads that have come out that have talked about your experience, your years of experience, and I guess in this day and age, experience is not necessarily a good thing, which I kind of find surprising. But what I really find surprising is for someone someone smarter than me told me this, that for someone who is wanting to have a public service job, spending a lot of money to have that public service job. And I don't think that he realizes how many people work in public service and take a lot of pride in public school teachers, government employees, and they work really hard and they do a good job. And so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that a little bit.
Sure. Well, my opponent's been rather, I think, just straightforward with his thoughts and beliefs about people who work in public service. He basically said, "I have never had a real job in my career, and my career has been mostly public service." And I understand politics, and I know you got to have cute little phrases and things like that, but to me, that's a slap in the face of our people who serve in our military. It's a slap in the face of our firemen and our policemen, our first responders. It's a slap in the face of people who teach our kids in public education. I can go on, and we haven't even talked about the people who work in government, whether it's city, or county, or work at some district level. The bottom line is we have a lot of public servants in this state and in this country. And in fact, the gentleman who made that statement currently is a public servant. So he apparently is very unhappy in his own job because he's not doing a real job. And as you say, he is spending an awful lot of money to earn a job that he looks at as not a real job. I'll tell you this, I have been very honored that Montanans have said to me on a number of occasions, please do this job. Whether it's serving in the State House, serving as Secretary of State, serving in the State Senate, serving as Lieutenant Governor. I mean, and then I've also had the privilege of working for the state in different capacities, in the Department of Labor as the executive director or the director of the Montana Historical Society. I've always been honored that people have looked to me as someone who they wanted to trust with that responsibility to do the job that they wanted me to do. And I've been reelected as a state representative. I was reelected 3 times as Secretary of State. I was reelected as a state senator, where people had the opportunity to throw me out if they didn't want me to be there. They had the opportunity to throw me out as Lieutenant Governor, and they didn't do it. So it's been an honor, it's been a privilege. I've taken that, the trust that they've put in me very seriously, and I continue to look at public service as a very honorable and a wonderful way of me being able to make a living, keep my family in Montana, and to give back to the people of this state in these communities that I have the privilege of being a part of.
And that new grandson.
And I have a new grandson who is going to be hopefully a lifelong Montanan. And so far it's been great. 18 days or 19 days, I think, today.
Well, speaking of the youth vote, nice little segue there.
Yeah.
So we were talking before about the marijuana initiative that is being considered right now. The signatures are being counted, and it's not only young people that are interested in this initiative. It's a lot of people, a lot of Montanans, and I just wanted to get your thoughts about that issue and what that kind of revenue could mean for Montana to capture that revenue instead of sending it to Spokane, where it's going now, because marijuana is legal there. Can you just talk a little bit about that? And you were talking about working with the organization that was getting the signatures and the whole safety of everything.
Sure. Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to sit down with the proponents of the marijuana initiative because they wanted to educate me, and I was interested in learning more about it. And I do think, marijuana, the marijuana initiative is an important initiative in the state of Montana, especially now. Marijuana is becoming, much more acceptable. We're seeing even the states around Montana. Now, Colorado has legalized it, Washington, California. I mean, I think there's 13, 14 states that have already legalized it, and we're seeing efforts to further legalize it in states all around. And I think what's important about this is whatever happens in Montana, I think it really needs to be a Montana solution. I think the group that's been out there promoting this initiative has done a lot of research. I think they put a lot of thought into it, and I think it will give Montanans a very reasonable choice as to whether or not they want to support this sort of activity. And so what I think, one of the concerns that I had with them was under the current medical marijuana law, the state has a process of making sure the marijuana is tested, and it's tested for whether it has heavy metals, it's for its potency, or if there's any other issues that may be a problem for the health of the consumer. And I visited these at least one of these labs. I watched how they do things. It's pretty impressive, and I think it's the right way to go. And when I asked them in the initiative if this was going to be part of the initiative, they said that it was a little bit outside the scope of the initiative, but that in the initiative it says the state will write rules to implement this, and they assume that the state would use that tool as a way of saying, okay, just recreational marijuana would have to go through some sort of a testing procedure in order for the consumer to know what they were purchasing and what the potency was and so forth. So I think that would be a very smart thing to have happen. But I do think it's this is time for Montanans to make this choice. I know there are a lot of people, for many reasons, who support it, and I supported the initiative as they were out gathering signatures. And I just think this gives Montanans a say on how to deal with this. From a revenue standpoint, they address the revenue. I think it's a 20% tax on it. And then those revenues are guided towards certain programs in the state, and I think what they've done is they've tried to get a sense of where people would like to see those dollars go and how they'd be spent. So I think they put a lot of thought into it, and I think that's what we needed to do in Montana in order to come up with a plan that would really be a made in Montana plan on dealing with this. Goes to the vote of the people. If the people support it, then I think we have a very reasonable plan that we can move forward with. If the people decide that this isn't what they want, then my guess is this will be a base and it'll be revisited down the road, because that is just the nature of this issue throughout the United States.
Right. Well, I appreciate your answer to that, because a lot of people are kind of nervous about talking about it, but I just think it's something that we have to open our eyes about. And I mean,
it's happening.
Yeah, it's happening, and like I said earlier, Diane Sands had a bill to study it during the interim, and it was voted down. And it's like, we gotta not put our head in the sand and things like this. So, but is there anything you'd like to talk about that I haven't covered? Because I don't know what happens from day to day, but I know that it's been an interesting situation with this virus and so forth. But
wow, we can talk about that. I mean, it's changed so much of how, when I jumped in this race July of last year, I did not have any indication that we would be dealing with a campaign in the middle of a pandemic. And I didn't realize, I figured that I would be on the road all the time. I would be meeting face to face with people. And when the pandemic came, that changed overnight. Absolutely, just overnight. Yeah. And it's been a real interesting challenge trying to figure out how does one campaign in a 147,000 square mile state with people scattered all over without having the ability to really travel and to be face to face with them.
Zoom doesn't quite cut it when you really want to.
Zoom is, we're thankful we have it, but it isn't the same. I didn't realize how much I would actually miss the traditional campaigning, but not spending time face to face with people in their backyards with a cold beer in your hand, having a conversation and listening to what they have to say and reading their body language and really getting a sense of what they're thinking and what's important. That is so important to candidates. Honestly, that's where I think a lot of candidates kind of get their ideas and their thoughts and where their priorities are. We talk a lot about Montana values. Well, thank goodness I've been around long enough and talked to a lot of Montanans that I think I understand Montana values are people wanting good jobs to be able to raise their families, people wanting to make sure their kids get a great education in our public school system so their kids can go out and compete. Montanans are very concerned about having a quality health care and access to quality health care and be able to afford their prescription drugs. That's a big, and very much so the idea that outside our back door is some of the best public land in this world, and we have access. We own that public land. And that's what's very exciting. Those are Montana values, and I didn't make them up.
Right.
I learned about those values basically in having a lifetime of public service. And I think that distinguishes me very much between my opponent, who really has not experienced those things in his lifetime as I've experienced them. Because I'm from here, I grew up here, my family is from here, just who I am, and it's how I've raised my family, and it's how I see my brand new grandson being raised, and I want him to have as many opportunities, if not more, than what I had growing up.
Well,
Those
I
are
have
my
to tell you
values.
that it's really refreshing to not hear you say it. I'm a 6th generation white Montanan because I get weary of that.
Yeah.
Because some of us are and some of us aren't, but we're all Montanans.
We're all Montanans.
And it just doesn't, I mean, the family values and the Montana values thing, we all are in this together. And I think that values are different to different people.
Sure.
And so that whole argument can sometimes get really old.
Sure.
But I was just in Glacier Park yesterday with my daughter going to the Sun Highway, and just astounded by the beauty and the splendor that the state affords. And the whole public lands issue was kind of new to me because I didn't really, my dad wasn't a hunter and things like that, but my husband is.
Sure.
And so I learned all about, private property and getting permission to hunt and things like that. And so the public lands issue, now that I understand what some folks want to do by turning public land over to the states, and then the states can't afford to take care of the land, so they sell it off.
Right. And who buys it?
Yeah.
It's not you, it's not me.
And when I learned that there's no public land in Texas, the state of Texas, there's no public lands there at all. And it's kind of a foreign idea to me that you can't just go out and,
it is an amazing thing in Montana, wherever you drive, and I wish I knew everything about the geography, but there are places where you can drive down and you can be with somebody who's from out of town or from out of state, and you can say, see that over there? I own that. And they go, oh, you're kidding. I own that. And then I own this over here. And you see that down there on there? I own that down there. And they go, why, you own a what? I said, well, I'm a public landowner. Just like everybody in the state of Montana. We own these lands. And I said, and that's the beauty of it. And because I own it, I have access to that. You were up in Glacier Park just yesterday. I was floating the Jefferson River with my son and his wife and my wife. And we were just, we just drive down there, we put the raft in, we float down the river, we get it out, had a great day. That's the beauty. I mean, and there are people in this country that don't have that ability to go out and enjoy the landscape, and whether it's on the water, in the mountains, on trails, out in the prairies, wherever there is public land that we can literally have access, and you and I and everybody else in Montana, we're the owners, and that's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. And that's probably a pretty good way to end the interview. Unless there's anything else you had to add.
No.
I really appreciate your time, Mike.
Thank you.
It was great to be able to set this up, everything on the same day.
That is wonderful. I'm so glad it all worked out.